Welcome back once again, friends. We'll continue to build the pixel art activity in this video. Previously, we had built a function that could give us one square at any x and y coordinate, and we could fill that with any color that we wanted. Now we are going to proceed. We are going to make use of the same function to create a complete row of squares. Something like what I've shown here. So I've got say one, two, three, perhaps many squares here. Also, you can see it, for example, from this graphic over here. We've got many rows of squares. Uh, we are going to see how we'll create it. Turns out that the best way to solve this problem is using a for loop. However, for this video, we will not get into building the for loop. Instead, we will just motivate why is it that we need a loop to efficiently solve this problem. In this process, we are also going to come across an interesting way of writing programs or writing a particular statement in a program, something like a variable is equal to variable plus something else. In fact, this turns out this is very similar to it's a change statement in Scratch. We'll see why this is interesting and how we can use this. But let's just get back to where we were. Remember, we had this one code where we had a function to create a rectangle, and we had used this to create say multiple rectangles here, right? So I'm going to clean up all of this. Let's say I have a different problem statement right now. Let's say I want to create a row of rectangles, row of squares, say perhaps starting at x equals to minus 200. So what can I do, right? So I can be very simple here. I can just give myself, let's say, a variable x val equals to minus 200, and now I can maybe I'll also give the y val because I need to specify x and y both. So I say y val is equal to say 0. Now I can ask my Python, my interpreter to create me, or say my turtle to create me a rectangle or a square at x val, y val, right? So what will happen is that I'm going to get a green square at minus 200, 0, and nothing else, right? So let's just see this once. Let's just run this and see. Code runs, and indeed I get one square coming up there, right? Now, like I said, I wanted to create a complete row of squares. Let it be green in color for now. I wanted to create a complete row of squares, which means that I want to create now a next square, which is exactly touching this particular square. Now, how do I do this? Now, remember, we have got a program that can, we have got a function that can create squares, say in general rectangles, but we are using it to create squares at any given x and y position, right? So once I have created, for example, one square, I notice that my turtle is back at the initial point. All I really have to do is to move my turtle to say this point and then create the square once again with similar configuration, also the similar y value, right? So because I'm just moving along the sleeping line. How do I do that? Well, it's very simple. I know that the length of this square is 20. Somebody once asked me a very good question. What is the unit of this 20, right? Well, in fact, the unit of this you can think is pixels, right? It's like small elements on the screen, which is each one being taken as one. So it's say 20 pixels. Now, if I want to create a new next square, I can just go and say x val equals to say minus 180. Why do I say minus 180? Because remember, my first square appeared at minus 200. Now I've just added 20 to it. So I go to minus 180, and I can then take this command and write this say once again. Now be careful not to give any indentation because that's going to cause problems. But if I do this now, I'm going to get two squares, 1 and 2, because um, basically first square at minus 200, next at minus 180, right? Now you might say, okay, very simple. I can repeat this once again. I can say, I can go and say, perhaps I can have maybe at minus 160, and I should get three squares. And you are absolutely right. You are going to get three squares, right? One, two, three. And we see that happening. So now one way you can imagine is that I can keep doing this for the entire row, but as is clear from here, this is becoming quite cumbersome because we're going to have to maintain lots and lots of lines of code, which is quite inefficient, right? That's number one. And number two, we are moving this xval ourselves. So we are ourselves doing this minus 200 plus 20 is minus 180 plus 20 is 160 and so on and so forth. So let's solve both of these problems in a smart way, right? Now I'm going to solve one of them right now. The other one will just motivate a repeat loop. So for example, what I can do here is that instead of doing this myself, I can say go and change my xval to xval plus 20, and once again I can say go and change xval plus 20. Now this, something when a lot of programmers, when they start programming newly, this looks odd because it's mathematically kind of strange statement, right? We are saying something is equal to something plus 20. But what this really means is that we are telling our program to change the value of this variable by 20. So it's exactly equivalent in Scratch. In Scratch you have set and change for variables. This is like set variable to say minus 200, and now we are saying change value by 20. So it's like adding by 20. You can always change minus 20, or let's say any other number, right? So now if we did this, in fact this code is going to behave exactly like what we had done earlier. uh, there's no surprise. In fact, we can also write it a little bit more concisely by saying that xval plus equals to say 20, right? This will have exact same impact. But if this is confusing, you can just stick to xval equals to xval xval plus 20. Now, this is fine, but we are still having to write this, draw rectangle again and again. And you can clearly see that, in fact, now we are just repeating these two statements. So let's say I wanted to draw one more square. I'm going to say the same thing once again. Xval equals to xval plus, say, sorry, plus 20. And I can do this once again, right? So if I did this, I'm going to get, say, you know, I'm getting four rectangles, but you can clearly see the pattern emerging that I am basically repeating this xval, draw a rectangle and change of xval by 20, which is done by xval equals to xval plus 20. Now, this is something that in fact we have encountered before. I'm going to take you back to a game that you all, I believe would have done this. If not, you can go back and revise this. A simple brick breaking game, right? Now, look at this. In this, we had created a grid of sprites before the game starts. So I let the game get over. That's okay. Of course, my sprites also disappear. But notice how I created this grid of sprites using a repeat loop, right? So what I did was basically I created a row of sprites, and that also we had done using a repeat loop. And then we went on to make it a two-dimensional grid by repeating all the rows again and again. So in fact, the idea is the same. In Python also, we are going to do an equivalent of a repeat loop, because as we are seeing, we are indeed repeating statements. However, it turns out that there is no direct repeat loop in Python. In fact, what we have in Python is actually stronger than a repeat loop. We'll see its power as we go along, but that is called the for loop. However, before I get onto the for loop, I'll also have to explain to you a function called a range function, which we'll do in the next video. And then we'll see how the same problem can be solved using a for loop in an extremely efficient manner. In fact, a for loop is more than a repeat loop, and we'll see that also because we are going to give these squares a different color as they go along. All right, so I'm going to meet you again in the next video, but I hope the point that this particular problem requires a loop, kind of a repeat loop, I hope is clear to you at the end of this video. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.